Welcome back, class. We're jumping back into American Revolution and getting into chapter 9. And so if you haven't watched chapters 1 through 8, make sure you do that before watching this. We're going to be learning a little bit more about this conflict between Parliament and the colonists. So let's pause really quick and think about what has happened so far. What has Parliament been doing that the colonists haven't been so happy with? That's right. They've been taxing the colonists. The Parliament has been taxing colonists either through, the tea tax that we just learned about, and we also were just read about, and Johnny Tremaine, how the Sons of Liberty poured all the tea into the harbor. And so, sorry, one second. Let's read my notes really quick. In this chapter, we'll be able to learn a bit more about the gradual shift in attitude of the colonists. At first, they wanted to reconcile or bury their differences with the Great Britain and try to get along. So they wanted to make things work at first. But as time passed, their thinking started to change, and they started to realize maybe they don't want this relationship to continue. So during this chapter, we'll be able to identify Sam Adams and explain his role in forming the Committee of Correspondence, describe the colonists' attitude towards Britain after the Boston Massacre, explain how the Committees of Correspondence formed and what their purpose was, and then, as always, be able to understand the core chapter vocabulary words. And remember, you can get extra credit for history if you create your own sentence using one of the vocabulary words from the chapter. And remember, please do not copy and paste answers from the internet. Please use your own words. And if you're going to use the definitions, don't copy and paste a definition from Google. Use the exact definition found in the book so you can get full credit. All right, so let's start reading and dive into the big question. What does it say? What was the Committee of Correspondence? So we just read about some of our primary objectives for this chapter, and three of them talked about the Committee of Correspondence and how Sam Adams started this. So as we read, look for answers and points that answer the big question. Calm before the storm. In time, the anger over the Boston Massacre died down. The British government didn't do anything new to upset the American colonists. For the most part, American colonists tried not to upset the British government. Therefore, the next 3 years were mostly calm. So they were trying to get along, and for 3 years, there wasn't any tension. Let's look at this picture. In the early 1770s, colonists' feelings toward London and Britain itself were changing. So the tides were changing. Still, the way many colonists thought about Britain was changing. A country that sets up colonies in other lands is often called the mother country. That's what most colonists had always called England or Britain. So Britain was the mother country for the colonists. Even those who had never been there called Britain home. The British described the relationship with the colonies the same way. Prime Minister William Pitt once said, "This is the mother country. They are the children. They must obey, and we prescribe, set the rules." But children grow up. They learn to do things for themselves. They gain confidence. They need to do things their own way. Eventually, they live on their own, independently. So the children, the colonies, are growing up, and they want to do things independently from the mother country. After the Boston Massacre, some colonies wondered whether that time had come. This change in thinking happened slowly. At first, only a few felt that way. Most colonists wanted to stay in the British Empire. They were loyal to their king. They just thought it was time for British government to stop making rules for them. A small number of colonists talked about going further. They believed that they could only keep their liberties by breaking away from Britain. The colonies, they believed, must become independent. All right, so let's learn who Sam Adams is. Sam Adams of Boston was one of the colonists who believed in independence. Adams came from an important Boston family, and this looks like a picture of Sam Adams. Let's read the caption together. What does it say? Sam Adams wanted the colonies to be independent of Great Britain. So he was one of the first people to be thinking this and to be acting upon this thought of independence. In 1765, at the time of the Stamp Act, remember what the Stamp Act was? Britain had a tax on all things paper related, right? And the colonists did not want to pay taxes on those things. Remember, taxation without representation? So Adams helped to organize the Sons of Liberty. He was one of the leaders in the boycotts against British goods. From that time forward, Adams worked to convince others that it was time to separate from Great Britain. In newspaper articles, he told colonists to stand up against Britain for their rights. "The liberties of our country are worth defending at all risks," he wrote. "It would be a disgrace to follow our freedoms to be taken away. It would be a disgrace to allow our freedoms to be taken away from us by violence without a struggle, or be cheated out of them by tricks." And let's pause really quick. Those that are on track with John D. Tremaine, we're reading about the Observer, right? The Observer is the newspaper that is printed and sent around that Johnny delivers on his horse Goblin. And so it doesn't reference that here in this chapter, but it does talk about how Sam Adams is getting these newspaper articles sent. After the Boston Massacre, Adams and others in Boston created a way to alert colonists if or when the British government threatened their liberties. Again, in 1772, they set up a Committee of Correspondence. And then here we go. Here's some things for your big question. First, our vocabulary word, committee. Let's read the definition together. A group of people selected to do a certain task. Correspondence means an exchange of letters. So a committee, a group of people who are exchanging letters. If the British again took away any rights of Englishmen, committee members would immediately send letters across Massachusetts with the news. The idea spread quickly to other colonies. Soon, there was a great network of committees of correspondence, meaning little outposts or little groups of people all along that would send letters to one another. And so that's what the network means. They could get news out quickly within each colony and from one colony to another. Of course, these committees didn't put away their quill pens and paper and wait for the next conflict. A quill pen, let's read the definition, a pen made from the feather of a bird. They wrote to each other often. Little by little, the idea of independence spread throughout the colonies. Those who wanted independence were still in the minority. But what happened if the British government threatened their liberties once again? So at first, it's just a small group. But as it ends, that paragraph ends with a question. What would happen if the British government, impeded on their liberties again? Do you think there would be a bigger revolt? And let's look at this timeline, right? So rising tensions. So if we go to the beginning, the colonial population grows in 1750. The French and Indian War begins in 1745. 1763, King George III issues proclamation. There's the Stamp Act is passed. Taxation without representation. Colonists aren't very happy with that. Boston Massacre occurs in 1770. Not very happy with that. And then in 1772, the Committees of Correspondence are formed to be able to talk and communicate quickly. And this caption says, over time, relations become strained between Great Britain, the mother country, and the colonies. And that is chapter 9, class. Thanks for joining me. Before we end, if you guys want some help with the big question, I will go over some hints and points that you should cover. And if you're ending the video right now, I'll see you in the next one. So the big question, what was the Committee of Correspondence? All right, and so who was it started by? His first name starts with an S, and his last name starts with an A. So that's a hint. So they were a group of patriots who wrote to each other frequently. So other colonists and colonies up to date about the actions of the mother country, or who is the mother country. This Committee of Correspondence helped to do what? They were spreading what? And where were they spreading this stuff? Like where was They were helping to spread what, and how did they spread that? Okay, so those are some hints and points that you should be covering in your answer to the big question. Thanks for joining me. Make sure you're staying on top of your work. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I will see you guys in the next lesson. See ya.